I'm on the edge of a mountain, adrenaline coursing through my veins as the wind howls, tugging at the fabric of my jacket. In the distance, the forest seems alive, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. My name is Jesse Carter. You don't know me, but you will after this. This is the story of how I stumbled into a hidden treasure that nearly killed me. How a family's dark past collided with my own, and how I realized that some riches are too dangerous to touch. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona town full of sunshine, desert beauty, and mystery, as every desert town tends to have. But beneath the dry, sun-baked soil was something much darker, something ancient. My life was supposed to be simple. I thought it would always be that way, just me, my engineering job, and the small family I had. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, especially when you're least prepared. My father, Frank Carter, was a history professor, an academic man obsessed with the old days and what lay hidden beneath the earth. My mom, Claudia, was a quiet, reserved woman, always on the phone with distant relatives, often in tears. But the cracks in our perfect facade became apparent after my younger brother Ricky entered the picture. He was everything I wasn't: charming, reckless, and always one step away from getting into trouble. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in the eyes of our parents. It's hard to admit, but I spent my whole life resenting him. Growing up, I was the quiet, responsible, older brother, but I could never match the wildness that Ricky had. He got all the attention, all the affection. I was the good son, the quiet son. I remember being 10 years old and watching Ricky race his shiny new bike down the street. My parents had saved up for months to get him that bike, while I was stuck riding the rusty hand-me-downs from my father. Not once did they ask me if I wanted something new. And when I graduated college with an engineering degree, it was met with a nod from my father, followed by, "Good job, son. Now go get a job." But Ricky, he dropped out of school and somehow managed to convince our parents he was a genius. In their eyes, his every failure was just a stepping stone to success. I could feel it in my bones. Everything I did was never enough. But I didn't complain. I worked hard. I didn't need their approval, but secretly I craved it. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was one of those late afternoons in October, the kind where the desert air feels heavy with the promise of something unspoken. I was sitting in my apartment, sipping my coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Jesse, honey, you need to come home. It's about Ricky." Something about her voice made my heart race. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a quiet desperation in her words. I told myself it was probably nothing serious, maybe another one of Ricky's disastrous attempts at starting a business. I knew. Deep down, I knew. I drove the familiar roads back to the house, the one I'd left behind years ago. The dusty cacti and rolling desert hills stretched before me, the setting sun casting long shadows. When I pulled up to the house, everything seemed the same: the white picket fence, the worn-out porch swing. But it no longer felt like home. It felt suffocating. As I walked through the door, I was greeted by my mom sitting at the kitchen table, her hands trembling around a mug. My dad, as usual, was in his chair, staring at the TV with that vacant look he always had when he wasn't in the mood for a conversation. "Jesse," my mom whispered, her voice shaky. "Ricky's in trouble. Real trouble." I could feel my chest tighten. Of course it was Ricky. Always Ricky. She went on, explaining that his latest venture, another failed restaurant, had left him in a mountain of debt. Not just a few $1,000s. No, this was different. It was hundreds of thousands. And now, the creditors were closing in. There was a panic in my mom's eyes I'd never seen before. But the thing that made my stomach turn wasn't just the debt. It was what they planned to do next. "We're remortgaging the house," my dad said, his voice steady, but there was something cold in his tone. "To help Ricky, he's family, we have to." I couldn't breathe. The house that had been my father's pride and joy, the home that had been paid off for years, it's all of it gone because of Ricky's irresponsibility. I didn't know how to respond. My voice came out in a low growl. "You're going to risk everything for him?" I asked. "For someone who's never earned a dime, who's failed at every single thing he's ever touched?" Dad's face hardened. "He's your brother, Jesse. Family sticks together. We've always helped you. This time, you need to help him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the world at their feet, but I didn't. I just stood there, fists clenched at my sides. as the weight of everything, years of being overlooked, years of watching Ricky fail upward, crashed down on me. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "But what about me? When was I ever good enough? What do you want me to do, huh? Help him with this, too." My mother reached for my hand, her voice soft but pleading. "You've always been the strong one. It's the one who didn't need help. Ricky, he needs us now." Her words stung. "I didn't need you," I whispered, more to myself than to her. I just stopped asking. I walked out that night, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. And just when I thought the night couldn't get worse, my father called after me. "Wait, Jesse, there's something for you." I turned back, expecting nothing more than some token gesture, but my mom handed me a folder. It was the deed to my grandfather's old cabins, some ramshackle place in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. My grandfather, Edward Carter, had disappeared there in 1971, and the cabin had been abandoned ever since. It had always been a mystery, one I wasn't interested in solving. I tossed the folder onto the table as I left, but deep down, something inside me felt heavy. Why had they given me this now? Why, after everything, was I getting this? The next few days felt like a blur, the cabin deed sitting on my kitchen table, daring me to open it. When I finally did, it wasn't the deed or the old photograph of a dilapidated cabin that caught my attention. It was a small, worn leather journal that fell out. My grandfather's journal, the man who had vanished without a trace. Inside, the pages were filled with meticulous notes about rocks, minerals, and some strange maps. One thing stood out: he had written about something hidden in the mountains, something more than just minerals, something that could change everything. I didn't know why, but something about it pulled me in, like a thread tugging at my soul. And that's how it began. The journey that would change my life forever. I didn't know what I was searching for, or why it mattered, but I couldn't stop myself from driving to Colorado. I didn't know what I'd find, but I needed to know the truth about the cabin, about my grandfather, and the secret he had hidden away for all these years. The drive to Colorado felt endless. The familiar desert landscape of Arizona gradually gave way to the rugged peaks and thick forests of the San Juan Mountains. Each mile I drove, the world seemed to shrink, until it was just me and the road ahead. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was calling me, something I wasn't meant to understand. Grandpa Edward had vanished here decades ago, and the cabin, the one they'd handed me in that folder, was the only clue left behind. I arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip behind the mountain peaks, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. The air was cold, almost biting, even though it was still autumn. The cabin itself stood in eerie silence, its decaying structure barely visible through the overgrown trees and tangled brush. I could feel the weight of years pressing down on it, the stories it had swallowed up over time. I stepped out of my truck and made my way toward the porch, my boots crunching against the dry, brittle leaves that covered the ground. The cabin seemed even more dilapidated up close. The wooden beams were rotting and the windows were shattered, leaving gaps where light filtered through in jagged streaks. For a moment I wondered why I had come, then the thought of the journal in my bag pushed me forward. Inside, the air smelled damp, stale like forgotten memories. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I moved cautiously through the space. The once cozy living room, now barren and filled with debris, still held remnants of the past: a faded couch with fabric peeling away. An old wood-burning stove in the corner, cold and unused. I dropped my bag in the corner and took out the journal. The leather cover was cracked with age, and the pages inside were yellowed and fragile. As I flipped through it, my heart began to race. Grandpa had written about something extraordinary, something buried deep in these mountains. He had discovered a vein of minerals, but not just any minerals. The journal's pages were filled with obsessive notes about gold, not the glittering jewelry gold, but raw, untouched gold, hidden, a secret, something big. The more I read, the more the words blurred together. The gold wasn't just a discovery, it was a key to something that could change everything. My grandfather had spent years mapping out the exact location of the deposit. It was near here in the mountains, and then his writing took a dark turn. His notes became frantic, with scribbles about betrayal, danger, and an urgent warning. Trust no one. I sat there, reading the last entry in the journal, my mind racing. The last thing he had written was about someone named Vincent, someone he had trusted until betrayal tore everything apart. Grandpa had never mentioned Vincent before. Who was he? And why had Grandpa disappeared? It wasn't just a family secret anymore. This was bigger, much bigger. I couldn't ignore the pull to uncover more. I had to find out what had happened to Grandpa and why he had disappeared all those years ago. What had Vincent done? Was he the reason Grandpa had never come home? And what was so dangerous about this gold? My heart pounded with each thought, the mystery growing more and more consuming. I had to see the place for myself. I had to know if the gold really existed. The next morning, I packed a small bag just enough for a few days. The weather had turned colder, and I knew I'd need to be prepared for whatever was out there. The map in Grandpa's journal led me deep into the mountains, past where the roads ended, and into a dense forest I wasn't sure I'd be able to navigate on my own. But I was determined. As I trekked into the heart of the San Juans, the air grew thinner, colder. The trees towered over me, blocking out the light, making it feel like I was walking in the shadow of something ancient and forgotten. The path, marked by little more than rough sketches on Grandpa's map, was treacherous rocks that slipped underfoot, steep inclines that seemed to stretch on forever. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into a world that had been sealed off from the rest of humanity. I kept my eyes on the map, the destination growing closer, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The woods were unnaturally quiet, and I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something following me. But when I glanced back, there was nothing. Just trees. Just the wind. By the time I reached the clearing that Grandpa's journal had marked, the sun was low on the horizon. The sky, a pale violet as twilight set in. The clearing was small, almost unremarkable, save for the boulders that dotted the landscape. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the faint shimmer in the dirt. There, partially uncovered by the earth, lay a vein of gold. Small flecks, barely visible, unless you knew what you were looking for, but unmistakable. I knelt down, trembling as I scraped away the dirt. The gold shimmered in the fading light, and my breath caught in my throat. It was real. Grandpa had been right. But as I pulled back the earth, revealing more of the glimmering veins, I heard it sound faint, like the rustling of branches, then a crackle of footsteps on the dry leaves, and my heart thudded in my chest, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. I wasn't alone. I spun around, scanning the forest, but there was no one in sight. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows across the clearing. Was it just the wind? Or had someone been watching me? I didn't know, but every instinct in me screamed to get out. But I didn't leave. I couldn't. I was too close. That night, as I huddled in the cabin, the wind howled outside. I kept thinking about that gold, about what my grandfather had left behind. And then I thought about Vincent. What if I wasn't the only one looking for this? What if Grandpa wasn't the first person to find the gold? There was more to this story. I was only just beginning to scratch the surface. The night passed uneasily. I lay in my grandfather's old bed, the wooden beams creaking with every gust of wind, and my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The journal was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a map to something that could change everything. The gold, the betrayal, Vincent, what did it all mean? Why had Grandpa kept it all hidden? And why did it feel like I was now walking in his footsteps, tracing a path that led me deeper into something far more dangerous than I could have imagined? The morning light was weak and cold when I packed up and set out again. My heart was pounding as I looked over the map, plotting my next move. The gold was there, was no denying it. But there was something more. Grandpa's frantic scribbles, his warnings. I couldn't ignore them. This wasn't just a treasure hunt. It was a race against time. What if someone else was already here, searching for the gold that was buried beneath these mountains? I knew I had to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant risking everything. I was already knee-deep in this mystery. There was no turning back now. By noon, I found myself at the site. The gold was just as I had left it, scattered in the dirt like forgotten coins. I took a few more samples, placing them carefully in my bag, the weight of what I was holding sinking in. This wasn't just a lucky find. It was real, and it could be huge. I spent the next few hours hiking further into the mountains, following the trail my grandfather had left. The journal's notes had been specific, but not detailed enough to give me an exact location. Yet every step I took felt like I was getting closer to something, like an invisible thread was pulling me forward. Then, just as I was about to turn back, something caught my eye. There, among the trees, was a stone monument, a small pile of rocks, stacked haphazardly. It didn't look like anything natural. It was too deliberate. I knelt down and brushed away the dirt, uncovering a faded inscription. The name Vincent was scratched into the stone. My pulse quickened. This was it. This was the place where everything had gone wrong. As I touched the stone, a thought hit me like a thunderclap. What if Vincent hadn't just betrayed Grandpa? What if Vincent was still here, watching me, waiting? A chill ran down my spine, and I suddenly felt like I was being watched. The trees surrounding me like silent witnesses. I spun around, scanning the shadows of the trees, but again there was nothing. The wind rustled, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out here, that someone or something was just beyond the line of sight. I spent the rest of the day searching the area. Every part of me screamed to leave, but I couldn't. I had to know what had happened here. I had to uncover the truth. The evening sky began to darken, and the temperature dropped sharply. The forest seemed to close in around me, the weight of its silence almost unbearable. I returned to the cabin as night fell, my nerves frayed. The emptiness inside the cabin felt more oppressive than before, the air thick with secrets. I couldn't stop thinking about Vincent. What had happened to him? Was he still out there? Or had my grandfather been right to warn me? Was I walking into something far darker than gold? The journal had been clear about one thing: trust no one. I couldn't stop wondering who else had come here searching for the treasure. Was I the only one? Or had there been others too? The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how little I truly knew about what was going on. My grandfather's disappearance had been a mystery for decades. Everyone had assumed he had simply wandered off into the mountains and gotten lost. But after seeing that stone monument with Vincent's name on it, I wasn't so sure anymore. That night, as I sat by the fire, a knock came at the door. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard anyone approach, and I certainly wasn't expecting company. I grabbed the flashlight, hesitating for a moment before I opened the door. A tall figure stood in the doorway, his face partially obscured by the hood of his jacket. He was alone. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice tight with suspicion. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped inside, his gaze moving over the cabin like he was looking for something or someone. When his eyes met mine, I saw a flash of recognition. "Looking for someone," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I think you know who I'm talking about." I felt a jolt of fear in my chest. He wasn't asking about my grandfather. He was asking about Vincent. "You're looking for Vincent?" I replied cautiously, my heart pounding. "Why?" The man's lips curled into a tight smile. "I'm not the only one, Jesse. You're not the only one looking for him. The gold. It's just a part of something much bigger." His words sent a wave of dread crashing over me. I took a step back, my mind racing. "Who are you?" I repeated, my voice shaking now. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook, identical to the one my grandfather had kept. My eyes widened. He opened the cover and slid it toward me. "Grandpa's journal?" I asked, stunned. The man nodded slowly. "I was with him when he made the discovery. I was the one who helped him find it." Something twisted in my gut. This was it. This was the moment I had been afraid of, the moment when I realized I wasn't alone in this search. And whatever was buried in those mountains was more dangerous than I had ever imagined. "We were partners," the man said. "But then, things went wrong." "Things?" I asked, my throat dry. "What happened?" The man paused, his expression darkening. "You don't want to know, but you're already involved now. The gold, it's just the beginning. There's something bigger here, something that could change everything. And if you're not careful, it might just end you." My heart skipped. "Who are you?" I demanded, my pulse racing. He didn't answer. Instead, he left the notebook on the table and stepped back into the night, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the notebook the stranger had left behind. The fire crackled in the corner of the room, casting flickering shadows on the walls as the cold night settled in. My mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. Who was that man? How did he know about the journal? Why had he come here? I couldn't let myself be shaken, but every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave. This was more than I had bargained for. The gold, the journal, Vincent's betrayal, it was all intertwined in a way I couldn't yet understand. But the man's warning echoed in my head like a drumbeat. The gold, it's just the beginning. I couldn't ignore it. I had to keep going. I had to know what this was all leading to, even if it meant putting myself in more danger. The next morning, I packed up my things and headed back into the mountains. The gold I had discovered in the clearing the day before still burned in my mind, but now I knew that finding it wasn't enough. There was something deeper, something that had been hidden for years. I needed to find out what it was. The air was even colder today, the clouds overhead thick and dark. As I made my way through the rugged terrain, I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like the eyes of the world were on me. I wasn't just looking for gold anymore. I was looking for answers. The man with the notebook had left me with more questions than answers. He had spoken like he knew what Grandpa had found, like he was a part of it. But if he had been a partner to Grandpa, why had he disappeared, leaving me to uncover everything on my own? The path leading up to the next part of the mountains felt different today. The usual quiet of the wilderness had shifted into something oppressive. The wind carried an eerie howl, like a warning. Every step I took felt heavier, like the weight of history was pressing down on me. There was something in these mountains, something Grandpa had hidden, something that had changed the course of his life and now mine. By midday, I reached the spot marked on Grandpa's map. It was a narrow, rocky crevice hidden in the thick forest, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly where to look. I felt a pang of unease in my chest as I approached it. This was it, the heart of whatever secret had been buried here. I crawled through the crevice, my flashlight cutting through the dark, damp air. The space opened up into a small cavern, its walls lined with jagged rocks. The air inside was thick with the scent of earth and something else, a strange metallic temp that made my skin crawl. And then there it was, a metal box, partially buried in the dirt. I hesitated, my breath shallow as I knelt down and pried it open. The box creaked as it gave way, revealing what looked like a collection of old papers. And my heart skipped a small chest. The chest was made of dark wood, bound with rusty iron, and it looked ancient. I couldn't help myself. I opened it, and inside, nestled among the papers, was a single object. It was a small gold medallion, its edges worn from time, but it gleamed in the faint light. I picked it up carefully, the weight of it heavy in my hand. The medallion had an intricate design, unlike anything I had ever seen before. There was something about it that felt otherworldly. I turned it over, and that's when I saw it. Engraved on the back of the medallion was a symbol, a strange, cryptic mark that looked almost like a map. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, a rustling sound as if someone or something was moving in the trees. My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the silent forest, the wind rustling through the leaves. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. I stuffed the medallion into my pocket and started to gather the papers from the box. But as I reached for the last set of maps, my hand brushed against something cold and hard. I pulled it out, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a photograph, a black and white image, faded with age, of two men standing side by side in front of a mountain range. One of them was Grandpa Edward, his face younger, his eyes hard and determined. The other man? It was the same man from last night, Vincent. I stared at the photo, a chill creeping up my spine. They had worked together. They had discovered the gold together. But what had happened to tear them apart? Why had Grandpa vanished without a trace, leaving Vincent behind? Why had the man from last night come after me? I didn't have time to think about it. Something else caught my eye. A piece of paper tucked beneath the photograph. The ink was smudged, but I could make out a few words. The gold is cursed. Protect it. Trust no one. My stomach turned. My grandfather had known. He had known the gold wasn't just a treasure, it was a danger, a threat. And now somehow I was tangled in it. I had to get out of here. I shoved the items back into the box and sealed it quickly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I moved to leave the cavern, but then the ground beneath me shifted. I froze, my heart thundering. The entire mountain seemed to shift. There was a loud crack, and suddenly, the cave entrance began to close in on itself. I scrambled backward, my legs nearly giving out as I ran toward the exit. The walls shook around me, the sound of falling rocks echoing in the cavern. I could hear the rumble of something much larger than a simple cave-in. The earth was angry. The mountains were angry. I didn't stop running until I burst out into the open air, gasping for breath, my legs burning with exhaustion. I didn't look back. I knew something terrible had just happened. Something had been triggered, something I wasn't supposed to find. I stumbled down the mountain, my heart racing. The sky had turned dark, the storm clouds swirling overhead as if the world itself was reflecting my inner chaos. Back at the cabin, I tried to process everything, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The gold, the medallion, Vincent, nothing made sense anymore. Grandpa's warnings echoed in my ears. Protect the gold, trust no one. And then it hit me. What if the gold wasn't meant to be found? What if Grandpa had hidden it for a reason? What if, in his last days, he had discovered the truth, something darker, more dangerous than the treasure itself? I felt the weight of it, the weight of my discovery, the weight of the curse. I had to leave. One had to get out of these mountains before it was too late. But the medallion. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a piece of gold. It was the key to everything. I had just unlocked the door to something much darker than I could have ever imagined. The storm hit harder that night. The wind howled through the trees, and rain pelted the cabin's roof, creating an incessant drumming sound that echoed through the entire building. The entire mountain seemed to shake under the fury of it. Inside, I was a mess of nerves, pacing back and forth. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there watching. I had just stumbled onto something far bigger than I could have imagined. Grandpa's warnings, the mysterious medallion, Vincent's connection to it all pointed to a past I wasn't ready to confront. The gold, the curse, the betrayal, and the dangerous secrets that had been buried for so long, it felt like it was consuming me. I couldn't just leave, though. I'd already gone too far. What if there were more hidden truths? What if the answers I needed were still here in these mountains? The journal had been my guide, but it was clear that the deeper I dug, the darker this mystery became. I spent the night unable to sleep, the storm too loud to ignore. The flashes of lightning cast harsh shadows across the walls, making it feel like the cabin was alive with the ghosts of the past. The man who had visited me, he had given me just enough to know that he wasn't some random stranger. He was involved, and whatever he knew was connected to the madness I was now wrapped up in. I sat by the fire, staring into the flickering flames, trying to process it all. But as the hours dragged on, I began to realize something that chilled me to my core. I wasn't just in danger from whatever secret lay buried in the mountains. I was in danger from the people who wanted it. I wasn't alone in my search for the gold. The man from last night hadn't just come to warn me, he had come to claim it. But who else was out there? What lengths would they go to get their hands on what Grandpa had left behind? Just as I was about to grab the journal again, hoping to find some overlooked clue, there was a sharp knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. My instincts screamed for me to hide, but I couldn't. I knew it wasn't just the wind this time. I stood frozen, the shadows in the cabin closing in on me. The knock came again, louder this time. Ow! Someone was outside. I moved cautiously toward the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. Who could it be at this hour, in the middle of a storm, out here in the mountains? I cracked open the door just a sliver enough to peer through, and there he was. The man from last night. I stepped back, my heart racing. This couldn't be happening. How did he find me again? I hadn't even left the cabin. He looked different now, more urgent. His eyes were wide with something fear, perhaps. He wasn't the calm, collected figure from before. This man was on edge. He stepped forward, and his voice was low, almost frantic. "Jesse," he said, "you have to listen to me. You don't understand what you're dealing with." I wasn't sure whether to open the door further or slam it shut, but something in his voice stopped me. There was a tremor in it that wasn't there before, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaky despite myself. "What's going on here?" His eyes darted over his shoulder, like he was checking for something or someone. He stepped closer to the door, lowering his voice. "They're coming for it. They're coming for all of it," he said urgently. "Vincent, he's not dead. He's been alive this whole time, and he's not the only one." My head spun. "Vincent? Alive? How could that be? Who's they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, eyes wild. "People who've been waiting for this moment. A lot of people who know the truth about the gold, about everything Grandpa discovered." He stopped, looking like he was wrestling with himself. Then he spoke again, slower, more measured. "I was his partner. Doug. Vincent was my friend once, but then he turned. You don't know how deep this goes. They'll stop at nothing to get what's hidden here. Gold, it's just a piece of it. But what Grandpa really found? That's what they're after." A knot tightened in my stomach. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about gold or treasure. It was about something much more dangerous, something that could change the world. I opened the door fully now, unable to stop myself. "Tell me everything," I said, almost pleading. I had to know what was happening. He stepped inside quickly, glancing nervously around the cabin before he finally took a seat. "My name is Jacob," he said, finally sitting down and looking me in the eye. "I worked with your grandfather back in the 70s. We were both geologists. We made the discovery together of the gold and of something far more dangerous. But when we realized what we had found, I wanted to walk away. Grandpa too, but Vincenti wouldn't let it go." I leaned forward, desperate to hear more. "What did you find?" Jacob's voice dropped, and he looked out the window for a moment before answering. "We didn't just find gold. We found evidence of something ancient, something buried in the San Juans long before anyone ever set foot here. And Vincent? Vincent wanted it all. He was obsessed with it. Didn't care what it cost, what it would do to people. And when Grandpa tried to back out, when he realized how dangerous it was, Vincent turned on him." "Turned on him," I echoed. "What do you mean?" Jacob clenched his jaw. "Your grandfather was going to bury it all. He was going to destroy everything. But Vincent, he couldn't let it go. That's why he betrayed him. That's why he disappeared." I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. I had known my grandfather had been involved in something big, but this was beyond what I could have imagined. The gold wasn't just a treasure. It was a key to something far older, far more dangerous than I could have ever guessed. "Vincent was after more than just the gold," Jacob continued, his voice low. "He was after what your grandfather found, and he's not the only one. There are people who have been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone like you to come along and uncover it. They'll stop at nothing to get it. If they find out you're here, if they find out you've discovered the truth." He didn't finish the sentence, but I didn't need him to. The look in his eyes said everything. I suddenly realized how deep I was in. I wasn't just uncovering a treasure. I had stumbled into a war one that had been raging in the shadows for decades. I was standing right in the middle of it. I could feel the weight of Jacob's words sinking in, each one dragging me deeper into the mess I had unwittingly walked into. The air in the cabin grew thick, suffocating. It was like the walls were closing in on me. Jacob's face was etched with the kind of fear I hadn't expected. This wasn't just some treasure hunt. This was a fight over something far more powerful and far more dangerous. What had Grandpa discovered all those years ago? I asked, my voice sharp, betraying the anger I was trying to suppress. "Why didn't you warn me when I first came here?" Jacob looked down, his eyes troubled. "I didn't know you were going to follow in your grandfather's footsteps," he muttered. "I thought you'd leave it alone. Now it's too late." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The storm outside had started to die down, but the air inside the cabin was thick with tension. It felt like I was sitting on the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown. "Tell me everything, Jacob," I said again, this time quieter, more resolute. "I need to know what Grandpa found. What did he uncover that's so dangerous?" Jacob hesitated, looking over his shoulder once more before he spoke. He paused, collecting his thoughts, before continuing. "What your grandfather found was more than just gold. It was an ancient artifact, something buried deep in the mountains for centuries. Not just a relic, but a key. He knew exactly what they had uncovered, and he wanted to control it. He was obsessed with it." I felt the blood drain from my face as I listened. I had been so focused on the gold, on the treasure, that I hadn't even considered the possibility of something more. An artifact? Key to some kind of power? But Grandpa didn't want any part of it, Jacob continued, his voice grim. He knew it was too dangerous, too powerful. So he made the decision to leave, to bury it, hide it from everyone. But Vincent couldn't let go. Jacob shifted uneasily in his seat, his eyes locking onto mine. Vincent didn't just betray your grandfather, he killed him. He made sure Grandpa never came back. And he took the artifact. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. You're saying that Vincent killed Grandpa? He did that for some artifact? Jacob nodded solemnly. Yes. Your grandfather's disappearance wasn't an accident. It wasn't just some old man getting lost in the mountains. Vincent hunted him down, took the artifact, and left your grandfather to die out there. Now, Vincent's not the only one looking for it. The people who've been hunting it, they're still out there. A wave of nausea washed over me. I had never imagined anything like this. Grandpa had never mentioned any of this in his journal, in the stories he had told me as a child. He had always spoken of the mountains like they were a place of peace, a place to escape to. But now, everything had changed. I felt my chest tighten as I thought about the man who had visited me the night before. The one who seemed to know more than I did. The one who had warned me. What about the man who came here? The one who said he was Grandpa's partner. Is he involved in this too? Jacob's face hardened. He's not just involved, Jesse. He's been hiding for years. He helped Vincent once. God. But after what happened to your grandfather, he disappeared. And now he's back, trying to find what was buried here. He's a part of this mess. Whether he wants to admit it or not, I felt a rush of anger flood through me. So what now? What do I do? How do I stop this? Jacob met my gaze, his expression grave. Don't stop it, Jesse. Not unless you're willing to sacrifice everything. I looked at him, confused. What do you mean? What's the choice here? Jacob stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the darkened landscape. The artifact your grandfather found, it's not just a key to power, it's a weapon. And if Vincent or anyone else gets their hands on it, there's no telling what they'll do with it. Your grandfather hid it for a reason. The key is buried deep, Jesse. In the heart of these mountains. I'm going to find it, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to find whatever Grandpa left behind, and I'm going to make sure it never falls into the wrong hands. Jacob turned to face me, his expression filled with a mixture of admiration and fear. You don't understand, do you? This is bigger than just you and me. This is about survival. If you go after the artifact, you're stepping into a war that's been going on for decades. And no one, no matter how strong they are, ever walks away from it unscathed. I could feel my pulse quicken. The words echoed in my mind. A war that's been going on for decades. It wasn't just about gold. It was about something far more dangerous, something my grandfather had tried to keep hidden, something that now seemed to be drawing me in like a magnet, pulling me into the very heart of the darkness. I looked at Jacob, my resolve hardening. I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes. Grandpa wanted to protect it. He died protecting it. Not going to let everything he did be for nothing. Jacob's eyes darkened, and he nodded slowly. What? Then you better be ready for what's coming. Because once you set foot in these mountains looking for that artifact, there's no turning back. I took a deep breath and turned toward the door. The storm had finally passed, and the night was eerily quiet now. But I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had made my choice. And now, there was no going back. And with that, Jesse prepares to face whatever dangerous forces lie ahead. Armed with the knowledge of his grandfather's dark secret and the threat of Vincent's return? Let me know if you'd like to wrap things up or expand further.